Interview with a narcissist. I dabbled in the minds of people with narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits, with intention in my recovery from narcissistic abuse. My curiosity, as my knowledge builds around the topic, has led me to observe confidential forums with diagnosed and self-proclaimed narcissistic people. They battle quietly and childishly for the title top narcissist. They are incapable of letting go of grandiosity, even with self-awareness. Psychopathic Narcissist seems to be the winning title, and each consider themselves to be very unique and proclaimed in their online demeanor. It is so unbeknown to them that they all share similar motives and energy in their cycle of abuse. I got to converse via texting with an NPD diagnosed man who confessed his purpose for speaking with me was to achieve narcissistic supply. Finally, I spoke to an undiagnosed narcissistic ex-lover and tried to navigate skillfully through his ego to learn. I believe I got to understand how his narcissism manifested, forming his beliefs and ideologies. Part 1. Exclusive forums for psychopaths and narcissists. I've spent months in forums for people diagnosed with antisocial behavior and NPD. Their self-awareness erupted because of criminal activities that led to a professional diagnosis, or a curiosity about their lack of empathy, and the toll their toxic behavior has taken on others, mostly family. Those that are diagnosed often refuse to accept the self-diagnosed as legit, and call them attention seekers and fakes. They bicker like children about this, and all general matters. I say without exaggeration, it's like observing a room of 2 to 5-year-olds with a vocabulary. The race to be the person that does not respond to the last person has the victory. Everyone wants to show how unbothered they are by the other pathetic person. Everyone but them is pathetic. The most common stance is to appear like you do not care. There are I do not care memes, and fancy writings on demand. How much you do not care is serious currency in their communications. It's hilarious. If you overreact to a hurtful comment, you are accused of being a silly empath. A common beef in these forums is how normal people deal with death. It's found to be annoying and very draining for the narcissist to show care and understanding. It is taxing on a narcissist's energy comforting someone mourning, and to them the griever is weak and self-serving. All narcissists are like 2-year-old toddlers that don't understand grief. This is why narcissists can be so cruel to you when you experience grief and other sadness. They exchange comforting you for narcissistic supply. Anybody normal is considered weak for their emotions, and death shows regular people's most vulgar display of emotions to the narcissist. In these forums, many of these self-aware narcissists praise themselves and each other for the symphony of evil they inflict on others. They laugh about devaluing their victims, and victims always running back for more abuse. Mind-fucking people is well received by the group if they cause devastating consequences on the victim. I have seen them impressing one another with their vengeance stories, and then gaslighting and cutting each other down as liars and fools, all in the same breath. They take each other on short cycles of abuse, by love-bombing one another with praise, devaluing each other with spiteful replies, and then they each race to win at not responding to a comment that deserved a reply. Also, they can discard and offer up the silent treatment instead, by not replying. They are like jealous, insecure adolescents trying to outdo each other always. There is an obsession to get into each other's minds and to create small-scale trauma bonds if possible. Diagnosed NPD people undergoing treatment are more cautious in these groups, and often advise the others to consider thinking before they speak, and act to those they want to keep in their personal life, specifically outside of the forum. I joined 3 forums in total. I noted stalemate in understandings between people with and without NPD, in forums permitted for both kinds of people. It occurs when normal people won't accept the non-negotiable belief system of NPD people, that they are always right. An example of this was a lady asking an audience of NPD people if they can acknowledge they emulate other people's habits, such as hobbies, persona and empathy, and to admit it is for manipulation purposes. With varied explanations from a handful of people, the answer was yes, but emulating others for the purpose of manipulation was always answered as no. There was an agreed theme among the NPD people, that emulating others is an asset. Comments went back and forth as the lady was fishing for anyone's acknowledgement that this is manipulative and wrong. No matter how hard she tried, the response she wanted wasn't achievable. Their responses included, I emulate others for my own social necessity, I copied their hobby so they can spend more time with me, I emulate empathy because it is necessary to survive. They're righteous either way, and this is what the lady was misunderstanding. How could it be manipulation when what they are doing is so correct, from their perfect perspective of themselves as godly? I was intrigued by a conversation between a man and a lady. The man I had been observing for months. He is diagnosed with antisocial behavior and NPD, and has little patience for the undiagnosed. The lady told him she has a teenage son she believes is a psychopathic narcissist, and she too is diagnosed with NPD. She complained of the help materials available not channeling her son's true needs. My understanding is they require help based on their reality and not ours. As an example, they do not want to hear how to get empathy, but rather techniques on how to manage life when you haven't any. The man explained to the mother that she will need to teach her son how to emulate empathy to get on in the world. The lady said her son told her he does not love or feel anything for her. She told her son that is okay. Despite this man and lady's insightful discussion, they still acted like children, tested one another's resilience by exchanging hurtful comments, and then decided they were worthy of an alliance, and ended their conversation amicably. In mixed forums, people without NPD antagonize NPD people. They do this by telling them their grievances with narcissists, what disgusting people they think they are, and they get into battles they cannot win. People write long paragraphs hoping to harm the narcissists, who reply with childish but edgy one-liners. I've become familiar with in these forums. If you have had any type of relationship with a narcissist, you'll remember making long pleas to be understood, and oftentimes receiving a few words back. Having an ongoing urgency for validation that will never be received by a narcissist unless they are love-bombing or hoovering you. This happens in these mixed forums, and they are toxic in my opinion, and makes me want to scream. No contact. It's a live demonstration of a cocktail of childhood traumas. The codependents are looking for impossible answers to heal their spouse. The label empath, restricting many victims from recovery, and the narcissists are trapped as traumatized children, forever protecting themselves behind an empty mask. Part 2. Interview with a narcissist. An NPD-diagnosed middle-aged man offered to answer any questions in a forum for victims of narcissistic abuse. I followed his conversation for weeks. It was mostly him being verbally abused, and victims getting wounded by his retaliations. He discarded people so brutally, I knew he was the real deal. He taunted his victims by asking questions like, "Who is the narcissist here really?" He laughed at people as they became nastier towards him, and denied it when they asked if he was offering advice for narcissistic supply. By studying this man and many others, I am certain that the worst trolls online are narcissists that have led people to suicide. The media coverage I see on this issue is all wrong. It requires educating the public about narcissism. This, however, is not in their favor, since our world is ruled by high-spectrum, self-aware, psychopathic narcissists. I finally found an opportunity one day, when negative communications had ceased, and he was available online. He told me he has had a partner for many years, who understands his diagnosis, and she possesses narcissistic traits. He genuinely enjoys her company, and does not use her for primary narcissistic supply. It is more beneficial for him to keep the peace with her, and he'll learn this in therapy. I asked if being interviewed in these forums gave him narcissistic supply. He said yes, so I asked, why didn't he say this to the others in the group, when they were accusing him of such, to which he replied, no one said I wasn't an anus, and this made me laugh. I asked him his feelings on sex, and he described it as nothing but physics, bodies rubbing together, and it feels good. He does not experience intimacy in sex. When I asked about knowing other people with NPD, his answers became vague, and I recognized I was hindering his ego. He mentioned he's been in the prison system, and he met many of his kind in prison. I recalled in my observations of him with others, giving them the silent treatment at the mention of popular, self-proclaimed psychopathic narcissists, Sam Vaknin, and H.G. Tudor. Part 3. Undercover interview with Nex. Nex, spelt N-E-X, stands for Narcissistic X. I had a couple opportunistic interviews with Nex whilst being hoovered 12 weeks after we broke up. I wanted to know how our interactions would change now that the veil was lifted. He is a cruel, malignant, overt, and covert narcissist that nearly triggered me to suicide, with a triangulation so deep, I still find it hard to fathom. He has taken me around the cycle of abuse several times for years. I began my recovery from previous narcissistic abuse, not realizing I was hooking up with one. We sat around my dining room table, and I noted the moment I appeared too strong was when he delivered subtle seeds of doubts. He implied I may be a little crazy after the breakup, and said, "Are you sure you're okay, because you just disappeared, and I know what you're like, and are you sure you're okay?" All the while staring at me, with fake concern in his eyes. I told him some time ago that leaving him would be hard, because I have known him since we were children. I told him I loved him as friends, before our sexual relations. He was so confused by this, and said he is not this way, and he can move on from anyone easily, and I have witnessed this as his truths. Now here he was emulating my words back to me, months later, a speech of how he cannot walk away so easily, due to our childhood history. I said, "But I told you this," and he changed the topic without me even noticing. Narcissistic childhood abuse by a parent has made me slow in spotting and reacting to violations, but it did make me laugh when I considered what he did later. He withholds sex as punishment, and for control. Knowing I hadn't had affection in a long time, he tried to tease me, before robbing me of pleasure, and whisking off into the night. I found myself feeling sorry for him, his copycat behavior, his empty soul, and obvious insecurities. I was anxious to not hear from him too soon, so I did an experiment. I sent him messages the following day. He responded to the first message, devalued the second, and discarded the rest as expected, and I was relieved. I entertained him one more time 2 weeks later over the phone, to complete my interview with a narcissist. I began with, "I know you think differently from everyone else, let's explore that." He replied, "I agree 100%. To no surprise, he was excited talking about himself intently, for hours. He said it was the most mind-stimulating conversation he had in months. He did not ask me a single thing about myself. It was hard for me to focus, and to get any answers between his long stories about how glorious he is as a parent, as an artist, and an exceptional human being. He was clearly rattled by the conversation the following day, and sent me an image that said I was a sapiosexual, with a woman licking a brain. He then unusually called me, later on in the day, pretending he wanted to do it all again, but it was to devalue and discard me. He called to punish me, and purposely ended the call mid-conversation, and ignored me when I phoned back. I was relieved, as I dreaded another conversation with him, and then I blocked him. I asked next, as a person who thinks so differently, what annoys you most about others. He said, I do not understand people's reaction to people dying. It is unnecessary, exhausting, they exaggerate. I was genuinely surprised that he had the same hate for people caring for people dying, like the NPD people I encountered in forums. I learned he sees most people as weak, their emotions as weak, and I certainly had heard most of what he had to say all before. Next told me he only started feeling sad emotions, appropriately during movies, after his dad died, when he was a teenager. The answers that followed made me suspect the sadness he felt was just a reflection of his own sadness he mildly experienced over his father, with no real feelings for any movie. In his early years he was sexually abused, had a neglectful mother, and achieved small celebrity status in his country as an artist. The latter came to an abrupt end when he moved to Europe. He describes this time with great suffering, and how I believe his narcissism was born. My ex-partner of 10 years has a similar story. He was also sexually abused in his younger years. He had neglectful parents, a golden child sister, moved to Europe in his younger years, and lived unstably with friends throughout his childhood. As a teenager, he chose not to speak to his mother for a number of years, for abandoning him in Europe. This more recent ex in his early 20s, he also would not speak to his mother for a number of years when she got married, whilst living with her. I have also seen Nex give his mum the silent treatment for days, privately laugh with me about it whilst she babies him until he relents, and he enjoys this process. Nex told me sex and intimacy are two completely different things, and he is good at performing both. He sees sex as a performance, and doesn't lust for it, like the average man. He became very reluctant about revealing too much on this topic, and said I would know him too well. The part he missed out, I believe, is he consciously uses sex for control, as I have heard him say this in the past when I was less informed. Next described gaslighting when he said, I just keep talking my facts, and what I believe on top of a person trying to express themselves, and I do so relentlessly, he said. His perception of this, of course, is not gaslighting. To him it is as an asset to simply get your important thing implemented, and to get whatever you want. His gaslighting is certainly not seen by him as mental abuse. He then shamelessly added that it works well on feeble people especially, and feeble people are easily spotted in any room, he said. He also described trauma bonding, in his own way, when I praised him for understanding other people's minds so well. Next said, if you show people the positive side of your character, when they see you act in the total opposite way, they will not believe it, and they will make excuses for any bad behaviors. The comprehension of his abuse was grade A, but with a different perception from the norm. To him this behavior is good for self, and therefore good character. He is a creative that writes music, and often shares his music with me for praise. During this phone call he shared his music, and I became relaxed. I was enjoying his company, and making myself ripe for having the rug pulled from under my feet. I was busy feeling empowered, and smart, knowing I was serving another purpose. He then told me the next song was inspired by me, and I couldn't wait. As he told me the lyrics, I could feel his smirk. I did a crazy laugh, feeling my blood boil with annoyance, as he read me the lyrics. I could not control my emotions. The lyrics were a complete reveal of our relationship, and probably several other women he is violating. The lyrics was about me as a needy woman, begging for his services and company, as if he is my savior, when I am depressed, and he has my healing and sexual medicine. He described me as confused, and him having my remedy. He tells of how alcohol and partying isn't working for me no more, but at least I have him. What we have is confidential, but he does have my back. Similar words spoken to me on other occasions. I could feel the narcissistic supply he was achieving, and very soon after, came the silent treatment to my now half-hearted questions. He flipped the script back, took back control, and put me back on the cycle of abuse, before I could even gather my thoughts. I wasn't ready, and our call ended soon after with him discarding me swiftly. Nex had shared intimate details about his past, and I remember, he reluctantly agreed when I said, "Perhaps you are still trapped in dealing with your emotions, like the 8-year-old scared child in Europe for the first time." His exit off the phone could not be considered rude to a listener, but it was covert narcissism and passive aggression. Narcissists are unpredictable, and no matter how much knowledge you unfold about narcissism, our mind is not equipped to battle with a true narcissist, unless you are one yourself. I felt like I had just interviewed a vampire.